couple of weeks back, I wrote about them when they came through my part of the country with the obvious question of, are they for real? At that time, my feeling was, I think so. They look pretty legitimate and substantive, and the timing for that question to kind of come up again is great because as losses go, comporting yourself the way they did last night in an overtime defeat to the Celtics is about as good as it gets. First of all, how the hell are you, my friend? And what's the word?
Yeah, I'm good. Good to see you guys. It's interesting the way that you frame that, Sam, because I think you're right. There has been, especially early on in the season, you're wondering, can this last? Can they keep it up? Is this for real? And there was a period maybe a couple of weeks ago where they started to kind of drop a couple of games, and you're wondering if the other shoe is kind of going to drop now, and the Wolves are coming back to earth. But really over the last few games now, and especially that Boston one last night where they don't have Rudy Gobert, they don't have Mike Conley, they still probably should have won that game and ended up losing in overtime to Boston. I do think that they feel like they have rediscovered some of the things that helped get them to where they are, which is number one in the West. And I think they've been there for 54 days now in a row, which is just pretty remarkable for this franchise's long history of futility.
They are, I will qualify, you mentioned the little bit of a downturn. They're 6-5 in the last 11. To hear you talk about them rediscovering things, I think you've already kind of answered this question, but, did they grow during that time? Do you think, did they steady the ship? And the way you're kind of hitting on it is that they're forging ahead with that same identity and confidence at this point, or was that, do any red flags remain from that little stretch?
Well, I would say, yeah, they just finished last night was a run of 16 straight games against teams with winning records, and I think 11 of those games were on the road. So it was a really tough stretch, and they went 9-7 during that stretch. So I do think that I wanted to use that window of games to really evaluate what their potential is for the rest of the season, and I do think that given that they were able to come out of it with a winning record, you still feel pretty good about their chances in the West. Now, one thing that they absolutely are continuing to work on is finding some consistency offensively. They've been a great defensive team all season long, number one, number two in the West all year, or excuse me, in the league all year. But their offense is kind of really stagnated right around 18th, 19th in the league in efficiency. And so a lot of the problems with the offense have been turnover related, and they're trying to figure out how to iron out those mistakes and kind of get more of a flow offensively so that they're a little more balanced. They know they can't be number one in defense and 20th in offense if they want to win in the playoffs. They have to get that offense up near the top 10 level, which is realistic given the talent that they have, but it has been a sticking point for most of this season.
Yeah, and it's not just the turnovers too, right? Like they don't really offensive rebound. How you would expect a team that's constructed on size to offensive rebound, and they lose the possession game on more nights than not. I was going to ask an offensive question too, because so they're 19th right now in points per possession. And when Mike Conley is going well, they can look really good. And sometimes when Conley doesn't have it, they kind of look like they're running in mud, is I think the better way to put it. Are they too reliant on Mike Conley? And if so, is that something the organization is concerned about? How are they looking to alleviate that? Are they looking to lean on the other guys who they already have, Ant and those guys more? Are they going to look for outside help? What do you see happening there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the good news is that Mike Conley's been largely great for this season, but he is 36 years old. He just, he sat out the game against Boston. And remember, guys, they flew on the day of the game to Boston and still really put up a fight. And so that was, I think, pretty good considering that Rudy and Mike are their two kind of safety blankets in terms of late game offense. When it gets stagnant, you have Mike and Rudy in the pick and roll, and that creates good offense for them some way, somehow. And so I do think that there is a correlation. When Mike Conley is playing very well, they look about as good as most teams in the league. When he is not playing well, they have a hard time pivoting away from it and finding other ways to get really good offense. What you see more often than not with them on nights that he's off is the ball really sticking, a lot of ISO, a lot of forced shots, and then you have Edwards driving into traffic and sometimes turning the ball over and taking tough shots. Karl Anthony Towns doing the same thing. So that's what they're trying to work through. And so I do think that the organization, Tim Conley, is absolutely looking at, as the trade deadline approaches, some options to try to give them more juice coming off of the bench behind Mike Conley, because they don't really have another point guard behind him. Jordan McLaughlin's a nice player, but he is not going to be one that steps in and plays heavy minutes, either if Conley is injured or out, or just if he's struggling on that particular night. So I do think you'll look for, they are looking at adding a ball handler, adding a shooter to to give them some more space in the offense and to maybe be able to run things more efficiently than just relying on the superior individual talents of Towns and Edwards. They can do it, but it's kind of not a recipe for consistent success offensively.
John, this week, it comes out that Netflix has an interesting documentary series. What are they calling it again, by the way? Remember the title?
I don't remember the title of it, but it's just like the quarterback, right?
It's the play caller. Sorry, that's our podcast. Apologies. But it's a NBA focused 5 guys behind the scenes. Anthony Edwards is one of them. What struck me about that is a couple things. For one, as a guy who has a soft spot for small markets, I kind of love that Minnesota and Sacramento are both in there because Domantas Sabonis is also featured. But it also is the latest reminder that the Minnesota Timberwolves are Anthony Edwards' team. And, the dynamics that I found so interesting and that I did write about a little while back was, how does Cat feel about that? How does Rudy fit into this? That train is going to keep, chugging down that track in terms of Ant being the man here. Are those dynamics just, as steady as can be and still as good as they were before? Maybe even better at this point in terms of just the human part of these guys figuring it out?
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, when you win at the level that they've won at, it kind of validates everything that they've been doing. And so it's hard for people to complain about roles, about things like anything like that when you're first in the West and when things are going well. The other thing about that makes it, I think, easier for the Timberwolves is that Anthony Edwards is a very charismatic, easy to like dude in the locker room. And I think a lot of the guys really respect him for the way that he works, for the way that he relates to everyone. And even on those nights when he maybe gets a little bit too aggressive and tries to put too much on his shoulders, it's more of a case of viewed as, he's so talented and these are mistakes of ambition than anything else. And Edwards himself is very coachable. And when he makes mistakes, he acknowledges them, he apologizes for them, and he does kind of take accountability. And so all of those things do help that process go forward smoothly. But I do think we are seeing a point in the season right now, just a little window into him still being a 22-year-old. I mean, last night in Boston, he was in the fourth quarter in overtime. He was 1 for 7 with 3 turnovers. And as they just needed a couple of more buckets to close that thing out, maybe there was an ill-advised shot here or there. Maybe there was a bad turnover. And so you have Chris Finch, you have Mike Conley, especially constantly sort of reminding him and emphasizing to him the importance of moving the ball, trusting that it'll come back to you, and kind of working through the impatience of youth. And no one, everyone kind of understands what he is going through, and the mistakes that he does make are just kind of come with the territory of being a young star and a young go-to player. But at the same time, I do think that these veterans are really trying to really drill into him that if he just stays within the offense and plays team basketball, that it'll be better for him and for everyone else. And so it's a work in progress that way. But in terms of chemistry, in terms of pecking order and leadership and all of those things, it's been really good that way for the entire season.
John, are we going to get a 5,000 word feature from you if Nas Reed goes 50, 40, 90?
I mean, 5,000 words wouldn't even cover it. I mean, it'd be a couple chapters.
You'd have to do 3 chapters,
a 3-part series.
One that's 50,000 words, one that's 40,000 words, and one that's 90,000 words. Just
That's
to
right.
Keep it on theme.
We'll do it. Yeah. It's been great. He's super fun. But you look at, he's so talented. I mean, I really do believe it that he belongs in the 6th man of the year category race, just given the success of the team and how important he is to that second unit. But his shooting from 3, and he shoots 40% from 3 at a decent volume coming off. He's not just taking 1 or 2 a game. He's letting it rip. And he is supremely talented offensively with the handle, with the shooting, with the post game. So it's been critical to what they've done. But 50, 40, 90 is surprising everyone around here, even. That's for sure.
He's also, you got to help me understand the Timberwolves fans' proclivity for Nas reading the hell out of our comments section. Any Timberwolves story that gets published, there's real reaction, and then there's about half of it is Nas Reed in the comments. Is that just Nas Reed love? Is that all that is?
Totally. He's a cult hero here. You need to be in Target Center, guys, when he gets introduced. When he comes in,
is it Bobby Portis levels?
It's Bobby Portis level. Okay. Absolutely. It's he is a central figure in here, and I do think what the biggest thing, you say why does Nas Reed resonate so much with this fan base? And I do think that they look at Nas Reed as just a trophy for them in terms of he was undrafted, comes in and has developed into what he has today. And I think that forever the Timberwolves franchise was always viewed as one that never really found the diamond in the rough, that that would even with their high draft picks, they'd botch those and it wouldn't work out. Well, here is a case where, credit to Gerson Rosas, who was here previously and signed him undrafted the year that he came out. And then credit to Nas Reed, who has reshaped his body, who has, kind of really honed his game and worked his butt off to become, this player who is so talented, but also you can tell just wears his heart on his sleeve and plays so damn hard every single night. And so it just makes him unbelievably popular here in Minnesota. There's a pizza place just a few blocks away from where I live, and there's a sign outside that says "honk if you love Nas Reed," and people are honking all the time.
You're honking, John. Don't pretend you're not honking.
Absolutely, why not? But yeah, so I mean, that just kind of tells you there's all sorts of those little anecdotes about what he means to this fan base, and they just see him as kind of a view of, hey, the organization finally accomplished something. And did the smart thing and the hard work thing by finding this guy who every other team could have had and missed on, and he's a Timberwolves guy and he's their guy, and so he's just, it's Nas Reed is a meme, it's a call, it's a siren call, whatever you want to call it, and it's a movement. Yeah, so it's a honk.
It's a honk.
It's a honk.
Exactly.
I just love the idea that John is home, peaceful by himself. Finally works 90 hours a week covering the Timberwolves, going around the country and getting up early and going to bed late and pulling all-nighters, and finally he gets a second to rest. And just as his head hits the bed, and just as he's about to go to sleep, he hears this loud honk, and it's Nas Reed keeping him up every night.
That's it. Hey, I've been waiting for stuff like this for 20 years, so why not?
So within that, and on a less lighthearted note, more business question for you. This is an unanswerable question that I'll ask anyway, just to get your perspective. Nas Reed represents the perceived tipping point when they gave him this current deal of kind of the question of, good God, how much money are they going to give to big guys, and what does that do to the luxury tax down the road? And now, because really most of us did not see this level of play coming, Now, a question that we didn't think would be on the table is going to be on the table, which is how far does this team have to go in order for this, new ownership group of Alex Rodriguez and Mark Lore to just take that big old gulp and say, okay, we're just going to pay for everything. I mean, do they have to win the whole thing? Do they have to get to the finals? What do you think the point of view is there?
Yeah, I mean, you're right, and it is unanswerable because we just have not yet seen Mark Lore and Alex Rodriguez in action in terms of from a, being the number one guys, the controlling owners yet. They've been very active in terms of working with Glenn Taylor to make moves. They were on the front end of the Rudy Gobert trade. They were on the front end of the Tim Conley hire and paying the big money that he got to come here. So they have shown an aggressiveness in wanting to spend money, but it's not been all of their money yet. And it's about to be, in right around March, April, assuming that they get approved by the NBA and all of those things. And so until you're in that spot and in that seat, it's hard to really gauge what they're going to do. But the way that I view it is it's a good problem for them to have because, like you said, Sam, we did not know when they signed Nas Reed, you're like, man, they are giving Rudy Gobert a max deal. They have Karl Anthony Towns on a max deal. And now Nas Reed is getting $15 million a year. How is that going? How are they going to work, allocating that much financial resources to their front court? And the good news for them is that the three of those guys have all played very well together, and they've found a way to be successful with this unconventional roster construction. But I do think that anyone would have to say that the deeper the playoff run, the better for these guys, because they have to generate some revenue to help with the second apron, to help with the luxury tax. I think, though, guys, big picture, I can see them, if they go deeper into the playoffs, Western Conference Finals, NBA Finals, this group trying to keep them together, at least for the short haul here, because not only do they want to win at a very high level, but I think you're going to start to hear questions about a new arena and all of those things. And so the more you win now, the more support you can kind of build up for a new project that might come down the pike in 5-6 years, something like that. And so I do believe they see a window that is open for contention right now, and they're going to be aggressive going for that. But, it's easy for me to say it's not my money to spend.
Great stuff, John. Great stuff, Fred. Appreciate you both. I will say on the back end here, John is always a must read, but this week, people should go out of their way to go read his piece on Ricky Rubio, who kind of quietly retired this week, relatively speaking. And Ricky's a guy that is always going to spark flashbacks for me when the Kings worked him out in that. What year was that when he came out, John?
2009 was when he was drafted. Yep.
Yeah, people forget, man. The hype was just through the roof for Ricky coming out of Spain. I took a lot of pride in the fact that I landed one of the first interviews with him. He comes through Sacramento, and the late Dan Fagan, his agent at the time, had kind of orchestrated this interview where I felt like I was going to interview one of the Beatles. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic, but like they were guiding me through back doors to get into the hotel room, and you had to keep it quiet and not tell anybody. It's just, he was a massive star coming in, obviously dealt with injury early in his career. And you captured it well in the column, John, how like that spark, it never died completely, but it was never the same as it was that first year. Dude had vision for days and a hell of a smile, and the alliteration on his name, and a very kind soul, a guy who was real open with the public and the fans when he lost his mother, and mental health wise now is been real open about what he's going through. So all the best to Ricky. Go read John's column. As always, appreciate you, brother.